Hi, how are you doing? Welcome back. I'm so happy to be here yet for another video, and today we're going to talk something quite serious. Everything is serious, but this one is just one step further. So we're going to talk about the life after death and what happens to us after we die, and what is hell and what is heaven, the places where we end up after we die. So what is death? From a Christian perspective, death is the moment when the soul separates from the body for different reasons like old age, sickness, accidents, and so on. And the body goes on the path of decay here on earth, while the soul goes to his creator, where he was going to be judged. So if we wonder, where do we get all this information about souls and death? Well, the answer is quite simple. It's a revelation. And the revelation started all the way from the Old Testament, in the New Testament, and after that through the Holy Fathers of the Church. So first let's see, how is the soul after we die? What capacity it has and what can do and cannot do. First of all, we can see that life here on earth is about movement. It's active. And if we call that what happens after we die here, there is life, that means there's going to be activity there as well. And we learn even more about this through the revelation that actually the activity of the soul and the activity in the afterlife, it's more complex than the one here. And many times the life here on earth and the activity we have here on earth is just a simple reflection in a mirror of what's going to happen in the next one. So a very good example that we have in the New Testament, it's actually the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. And more precisely, the conversation that the rich man has with Abraham. And through this conversation, we can see the state of the soul and how active it is. And there are a few moments in this conversation that help us understand more of the capacities of the soul after death. First of all, we see that the rich man has the capacity to understand why he is in hell and why he deserves to be there. And because of that, we see that he has reason and judgment. He can see and hear. This is another important part, because while he's talking with Abraham, he can see him. And he can also see Lazarus. And he can hear Abraham answering back to him. He cannot hear Lazarus because Lazarus doesn't hear him. But that's a different aspect. Now, the fact that he's asking for some alleviation, this is another aspect of the soul. And that is that he has a will. He has hope. And the last one is the fact that he remembers his family and his relatives, which means that he has the memory of the things that happen on earth. Moving forward, we can also find some examples and some clues in the book of Revelation, where we can see that the souls have a concept and understand and feel the time as well while they are in hell or heaven. And we find this at Revelation 6, 10, 11. And it says, "And they cried with loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, until you judge and avenge our blood and those who dwell on earth?" And later on it says, "They should rest a little longer." These are very good clues for us to understand that there is a concept of time. So the next question, which I hear the most, is where is heaven and where is hell? Well, Revelation didn't give us specifics about this. And also the Holy Fathers talk about this, and they tell us, well, we shouldn't look so much of the place of hell and heaven, but just try and work on our lives in order to achieve heaven and run away from hell. In the older theology, heaven and hell are being described as physical spaces, and heaven being where the righteous rejoice in the presence of God and the saints, while hell is the place of pain and suffering. And between heaven and hell, there's a big abyss that no one can cross from one side to another. The new theology is talking about heaven and hell not just as something spatial only, but also as an existential state. We can find different examples at Holy Fathers. For example, St. John Damascus said that the fire from hell is the deprivation of the material things that they would desire to satisfy themselves. On the other side, the righteous, because they desire God, they will receive him as much as they want him. Also, Saint Isaac of Syria said that the sinners in the fires of hell will be whipped by the flames of love. So what happens is that when sinners depart from their bodies, they realize that their entire life they sinned against love, and that will bring them in itself all the pain, and it's going to be more suffering than any torture can create. This is because love works in two different ways. For those who receive the love, it's happiness, it's joy. But for those who are being rejected, love, it's pain and it's suffering. So what we understand from this is that the pain of the souls in hell comes from their incapacity to desire to be in communion with God. And also the fact that all those material things that were like making them happy on earth, they are not there anymore. They're being deprived by them. And on top of all that, they're being deprived by love. Those who lived in communion with God here on earth, and they did everything in their power, this communion in the next life, it would only increase. And the love will increase as well. So what happens in heaven? Well, heaven, first of all, is the place and the state where the righteous find themselves after the personal judgment. So the things that happen in heaven are being discovered to us through revelation. And these are a few of them. First of all, the righteous live a life without pain, without worries, without any kind of suffering. They live in a continuous state of happiness that through time there is no need to change. And they are basically partaking at a feast that lasts for eternity. Second of all, there's something very interesting that happens in heaven, and that is that we will receive some gifts. But these gifts, they don't have an analogy in this world. And we find this written by St. Paul. He says, "Eye has not seen, or ear has heard, nor have entered the heart of the man the things that God has prepared for those who love him." The next thing is the communion with God, the communion with saints, and the communion with the righteous. As we can see, humans are made social beings, and that will translate and that will continue in the afterlife. So what means is that full happiness cannot be attained without being social, and this communion with the saints and with God creates the perfect environment for the happiness to take place. So another thing that happens in heaven is the ability to see God. Well, this is something that some writers, some church writers, said that it's not really possible because the created soul cannot see the uncreated. And that is not false. The only thing is that we need to take in consideration the grace of God that the souls receive. And through the grace of God, what is created becomes supernatural. And through that, the possibility to see God. As we can see how St. Apostle Matthew wrote, and he said, "Blessed are pure in heart, for they shall see God." And there's one more thing that I want to talk about that happens in heaven, and that is the fact that the souls are not all going to be on the same level. we will receive the heaven in accordance to the work that we did here, on how much we strived here to be closer to God. That being said, all will rejoice. We find about this hierarchy in the Epistle of St. John, where he says, "In my Father's house there are many mansions." Also, St. Basil said something very beautiful about this hierarchy, and he explains it in a nice way. He said, "Because the Heavenly Father has many mansions, some will rest in a higher and more perfect state, and others on a lower state, but all will be honored with a peacefulness." So hopefully all of us will be honored with that peacefulness, no matter on what level we'll be finding ourselves in. So unfortunately now we have to talk about what happens in hell as well. And hell is the place and the state where the souls of the sinners go after the personal judgment, and also where the evil spirits are. Dostoevsky described in a poetical way what hell is, and he said that hell is the pain to not be able to love anymore. Of course, just as people ask themselves where heaven is, they are asking themselves where hell is. And St. John Chrysostom said to not try to find where hell is, but to try and strive to stay away from it. The existence of hell can be justified from a rational point of view. For example, if something that it's free to do whatever it wants, and if they choose to do something bad, then it has to be punished. That means God also has to have this kind of a system in order to punish the sinners. And as we can see many times, the actions and the bad things that happen here on earth are not being punished now, which means that in order to keep the balance and the order of things, they will receive their punishment after this life. So the way God created this world was that the virtues to be rewarded and the sins to be punished. And also, I think it's important to know that God would not treat virtues the same way he would treat the sins. So how are the sinners' souls going to be punished? What is going to happen to them? Well, first of all, there will be the distancing from God, which also equals death, equals pain. When you are getting further and further from God, you are moving away as well from his gifts. And without his gifts, there's only pain. The second punishment would be the lack of communion. As we saw earlier, we are made as social beings. But in hell, there's going to be no communion. So without communion, there's going to be only sadness. Being in hell also means they will be in the presence of the evil spirits. And the only communion, if we can call it that way, it will be with the evil spirits. And that is the only kind of interaction that they will have. But this interaction only will bring more pain and more suffering, more torture. And all these are going to be followed by the remorse, by being persecuted, by the remorse of knowing that they didn't follow God's will. And lastly, would be the fire of hell. And this fire of hell is not the same fire that we know here on earth. Actually, St. John Chrysostom wrote about it and described it very vividly, saying, "The fire here burns and it consumes." By here he means on earth. And it becomes something else, while the fire in hell burns for eternity and never stops. So the purpose of all these punishments is not so God can see us in pain. No, it's so we stay away from the sin. Because if there would be no sin, then there would be no hell. Because hell, after all, is the self-punishment that a rational being does by moving and departing themselves more and more from God's will, because the people, the persons who live in communion with God, for those there is no hell. Now, all these being said, we need to understand and we need to know that through the grace of God, Christians should not be afraid of death, especially because the eschatological condition of a Christian, of a person, is just to be like a pilgrim through this life. Unfortunately, in this modern world, we forget more and more about this, and we just keep sinking more and more into like this swamp full of sins. Let's not allow these illusions and these conceptions, these hedonistic conceptions that everything is here and now, because all these are going to just bury the thoughts about death, and most importantly, about life after death. I really hope that all these thoughts and all these words help you to understand a little bit better about what happens to us. And if you have any questions, please just let me know and I'll do my best to answer them. If I don't know the answer, I will try to find people who know the answers, and hopefully a message will be sent. I really, really appreciate if you guys are here to watch, and hopefully this can, I don't know, bring some inspiration and some good thoughts and some good words into one or two or how many people are gonna see it. Thank you so much for being here, and until next time, God bless. Bye.